Funding for Overheard with Evan Smith is provided in part by Hilco Partners, Texas Government Affairs Consultancy and its Global Healthcare Consulting Business Unit, Hilco Health, and by the Mattsson McHale Foundation in support of public television, and also by MFI Foundation, improving the quality of life within our community, and also by the Alice Kleberg Reynolds Foundation. And viewers like you, thank you.
I'm Evan Smith. This week, he's a veteran Newsweek columnist and editor, a familiar face and voice on the more thoughtful and less shouty public affairs shows, and the best-selling author of The Defining Moment, a truly terrific book about FDR's first 100 days. His latest book is The Promise, a compelling and definitive inside account of Barack Obama's first year in office. He's Jonathan Alter. This is Overheard.
Is that a vote you'd like to have back now? Because you're a judge or a justice in your case doesn't mean that you're free of personal opinions about things.
You have a dimmer view of him than you have of presidents past.
So when they take your name in vain, you just laugh it off. For the larger issue, though, in your mind, is that it's not about whether there ought to be a death penalty, but whether the death penalty as administered is fair.
Jonathan, welcome.
Thanks, Evan.
Glad to have you here.
Glad to be here.
What happened to Barack Obama in the last almost 2 years? What happened? It's a global question, but everyone's asking it.
Well, I guess I would summarize it this way, that we expected this president to ace communications. He was a silver-tongued orator during the campaign, and that he would struggle when it came to the inside game of getting things done in Washington because he had no experience. Right. I mean, he stopped by the Senate for a cup of coffee in 2005. And what happened instead was the reverse of that. So he has struggled to communicate, to frame a message, to connect to the American people in a way that really took him to a new level, or even continued the connection he had made during the campaign. He struggled terribly in that. I think that's cost him a lot. And yet, behind the scenes, when you close that door to the Oval Office or the Situation Room, he got a tremendous amount done. Now, and that's not just a matter of opinion. I mean, when you put points on the board, you can actually go down and look and see how many of his campaign promises he got done. And nonpartisan estimates of that give him very, very high marks. Now, he didn't get it all done. He didn't get Guantanamo Bay closed and some other things, but the health care bill, for instance, biggest piece of social legislation in 45 years.
And yet his critics will say he got it done with no Republican votes.
Well, he won ugly, but he won.
So winning ugly is still winning as far as the tally goes.
Well, sure. In the same way that Franklin Roosevelt took a lot of grief from liberals for the Social Security bill not being
everything they wanted,
everything they wanted in 1935. You've got to start somewhere, and this bill, it ends discrimination against sick people. You know, we lived in a country for an awfully long time where if you had a pre-existing condition and you got cancer, your kid got cancer, you had to sell your house. Right. And that's over now. That's not a small thing.
But you know, the interesting thing, while it's not arguable, you're saying is true. All the points, when you put him up on the board, he's accomplished an enormous amount in the first year, and yet a lot of people would not respond favorably to the idea that he's played the inside game well. They would say, in fact, he's really not played the inside game. He's not done well with Congress. He's been ruled by Congress as opposed to him exerting authority over them. He's not been bipartisan. He's not been able to get Republicans to come along with him.
Well, there's a couple things on that. First of all, he made a number of mistakes, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm rationalizing or excusing those mistakes. They were tactical mistakes, and we could talk all day about them. But he had, because of the way the rules of the Senate work, he had no margin for error. And he did need to at least try to get a couple of Republicans, and he did. Remember, in the first week of his presidency, he went to Capitol Hill and he did something entirely unprecedented in this country. He met with Republicans alone, no Democrats. And he said to them, look, the country's in trouble. Ronald Reagan's chief economic advisor says we need a massive stimulus. The economy is losing 750,000 jobs a month. If we stay on this pace, we're going to be in another Great Depression by the end of 2009. Join me. If there are things you don't like in this stimulus, tell me and I'll take them out. And the Republican leadership decided there was nothing in it for them politically to join him. And even before the meeting, John Boehner, the minority leader, instructed the Republican caucus, no cooperation, none. Right. Because they figured that if it worked, they wouldn't get any of the credit. The president would get all the credit. And if it failed and they participated, they'd get part of the blame. So the best thing for them politically was to play to the midterms, no cooperation. So I put that on them.
You say that's not him not being bipartisan.
The lack of bipartisanship is 98% the fault of the Republicans.
From that first.
Yeah, they just made a political decision. Right. It might have been a very smart decision politically in terms of getting the Congress back. I don't personally think it was a particularly patriotic decision. Right. You know, the
For
Democrats,
a bunch of people who talk about putting country first,
right.
they really weren't.
They weren't going to govern. And
right.
when I asked the president, when I interviewed him, what was your biggest surprise? He said, I thought they'd be more interested in governing.
Right.
That we would negotiate, that I'd have people to negotiate with.